Hey guys, and welcome back to the Property Strategy Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Mike Mortlock, Managing Director of MCG Quantity Surveyors. Mike, thank you so much for having me, although you should be welcoming me because I believe I'm in your hometown.
Yes, I won't do a welcome to country because I came from Europe. But
It can be a welcome to Lake Macquarie.
Welcome to Lake Macquarie, West Lake Macquarie, which has got a little bit of a sort of a rougher
Is
style.
that right?
Not here on the water though. Like you know.
I just saw a property down the road on the market for $4 million. On this street.
Yeah, this is Game Plan's budget
Isn't
territory.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe not this exact property that we find ourselves in.
There's a Bentley in the garage.
That is true. Did you see the little Chucky
I did.
goal around the corner there?
That'll keep me up nights, I think. And I'm amazed you got to sleep with that thing in the house.
Yeah, I am running a bit
You have to
tired.
take a picture and chuck it in the post
You
so
are
people
right.
understand.
I should. But no, it's obviously a beautiful setting. Setting. Is this where you call home? These surrounds?
Yeah, so I live literally the other side of the lake. We used to do across the lake swim back in the day. They sort of shut that down for sharks. Yeah,
I was going to say, I'd be scared.
3.8 Ks it is. Well,
Did
from
you
Bolton Point to
Did you have
Belmont.
encounters?
No sharkies.
Number one fear of mine.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Love them, fascinated by them. Probably that's why I'm scared, because I used to just do so much research into them. But you've never seen...
I've seen them in the lake, yeah.
Big
I've
uns?
never been chewed on by one, thankfully. Yeah, I've seen probably like 2 to 3 metre whites. They come in as a bit of a nursery.
Yeah. Are you on a boat when you're seeing them?
No, actually, that particular one, I was riding a bike across Swansea Bridge, and the water was so crystal clear. I saw it right there. Yeah. But I don't think anyone's ever been tagged by one here. No, they're pretty benign.
But a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah.
Beautiful part of the world.
Yeah.
So at the time of recording this, for full transparency, we are 8 days away from the May budget release. So we're going to come into this conversation with some, educated guesses.
What did Bush say? There were known knowns and unknown knowns and known unknowns and so some of that sort of stuff. I mean, I've got a fairly good idea that whatever they're going to announce will be a mistake for what they're actually trying to achieve. But yeah, I mean, it's a fairly well-worn tradition that they throw things out there as like, oh, we're considering this, and then they get the feedback and they're like, oh no, we were never considering that, because 90% of people go like, oh, we're going to vote for somebody, we're going to vote for Pauline if you do that.
Are you seeing that there is, upheaval in the space with what's been announced so far?
Oh yeah, I think the problem that we have is that we have a generation coming through now that will probably pay more tax than any other generation that we've had in the past. Asset prices, like I've had arguments with boomers before, just that will say like, oh, it was as hard to buy a property for us as it is for young people today. It's fundamentally not true. Like the average income to asset price ratio is completely different.
Yeah.
And I mean, they'll sort of cite, oh, we paid 17% interest rates. Notwithstanding, it's still actually harder to buy a property. So we are a property-centric nation. We covet home ownership percentages in ways that they don't in places like Singapore or the UK, right? And I think that's a fundamentally positive thing. But the issue that we have is that what the policies that they're putting forward are conveniently kind of misdirecting from their own failings, like the 1.2 million homes they were going to build over 5 years. Year 3 is about to start and we're about 30% behind. I don't think we'll do it in 6 years. We might not do it in 7. But it's now easier to point the finger at property investors are the reason why house prices have gone through the roof, not their inability to create supply, not these first home buying schemes that CoreLogic came out earlier late last month saying basically everything below that cap has gone through the roof compared to things above. And they've just been doing that year after year after year. And the issue is that we kind of think there's this magic dynamic where a property investor leaves and a first home buyer magically takes their place. But we've got to understand that we're at crisis levels of housing supply in 2 areas. One is we're not building enough, and we don't have enough rental accommodation. So if you're a first home buyer or a prospective one trying to save for a deposit, you likely are in a rental property. Sure, there's people that are staying at home with mum and dad as much as they can, and people that are a little bit out of touch will say, oh, just stay home a bit longer and, use the bank of mum and dad, which I think is now the 5th biggest lender in Australia. But not everyone's in that situation. Crisis rental vacancy rates is a problem, and then we're just making it less attractive for investors to participate. And they're doing more than 90% of the rental accommodation supply in Australia.
Is what property investors are providing to the market.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what is proposed so far. So there's been a couple of things that have been kind of released over the last, I don't know, maybe month and a half. What I'm hearing, maybe you can validate them yourself, is that the negative gearing will be capped potentially at 2 properties, and that CGT discount will be reduced from 50% to maybe 33% if the property is held for greater than 1 year.
Yeah.
Are you hearing the same thing, or are you hearing different percentages or numbers?
Different variations,
Okay,
50 to 33 to as low as 25.
Yep.
Again, sometimes they throw something out and they go, oh, we didn't do the 25, so
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
as bad as you thought, just to try and soften the blow. Yes, limit negative gearing, which is a broken election promise from the Albanese government, so maybe capping it at 2. And, the problem with that is that there's always unintended consequences. So if we're talking property strategy, it's on your shirt, right? So it's probably a good conversation
Yes,
to have.
absolutely.
It's just going to pervert the decisions that people make, okay? So maybe we go, the first 2 are absolutely disgustingly negatively geared, just 1% yield, and we try and buy a $2 million property, and then at the back end we stuff it with cashies. I mean, probably not a brilliant strategy, but we just don't know, and those sorts of things happen. Like we modelled the change to land tax in Queensland, which was legislated but didn't actually hit effect. It was supposed to hit like 1 July, and it was repealed some 98 days later. We saw like a 14% drop in our investors purchasing in Queensland.
Right.
And the beneficiary of that was probably WA. We've seen what's happened to Victorian prices with their land tax threshold to, $49,999.
Basically nothing.
A dog kennel might sneak under with its land component. And really, it depends on the story. Some economists have been saying, rents didn't go through the roof as we lost, tens of thousands of property investors. But in certain pockets, there's been 20% growth in rent in a 12-month period, right? So it's a bit like saying, Melbourne's not performing well right now because the last CoreLogic number figure said that it actually contracted. But property prices in places like Frankston and Ballarat have been going through the roof. So it just depends on the metric. But I just see it as a fundamentally bad idea to remove investors when the government is not ready to step in as a replacement.
Yeah, because what's the alternative if you lose investors?
Yeah, well, I suppose you can go back 70 years and around a third of households rent, right? So it's a fairly long-term trend. We need, just under 3 million rental dwellings, and the government doesn't own, 500,000 of them, right? So without those investors, we've got nothing to take its place. And I think people forget about the back end as well. And investors are just convenient as a tax revenue and scapegoat, sure. Although Chalmers said in the CBA podcast, don't expect the revenue to sort of hit immediately. So he's already sort of saying, we don't think this is going to have a huge difference to the budget bottom line in the short term, because I suppose referencing unintended consequences and people finding ways to get around it. It's a degree of madness that, unfortunately, I suppose we've seen in the last few election cycles, but since Bill Shorten lost 2 of them with his negative gearing and CGT stuff, we kind of thought that it
might
maybe
be the end
will
of it
go
for a
away
little
for a
while.
while.
Yeah.
But Labor just has such an overwhelming majority. So a lot of people are saying, this is the time to do it.
Yeah.
It is the time to do it if you're a government trying to get it through. It's not the time to do it when we've got 1.3% vacancy rates nationally. I feel like it's going to be very, very dangerous. And they're trying to sort of help Sydney and Melbourne first home buyers. But what are they going to do? They're probably going to punish disproportionately regional renters. Because in our own data, and you guys will see that as well, a lot of property investors are buying in that 500 to 650 space, and they're buying in places like Townsville and Ballarat. So that rental supply that's there, that's helping to moderate those rents, is not going to be there, and it's not going to do really much at all to first home buyers in Sydney and Melbourne.
Do you think that one of the unintended consequences will be significant impacts to rents nationally?
I believe so. Yeah.
And why?
So. Well, it's just a supply. The rental supply will diminish because people they won't be incentivized to participate in property.
Right.
In terms of all of the asset classes, it's going to be the most heavily taxed, right? Because when we talk about negative gearing, they're not talking about negative geared asset portfolio in terms of equities, ASX.
It's just property.
Yeah, they're focusing it on the property.
Are you hearing that it's a number of properties per household, per couple?
The data doesn't exist. I think, the reality is that there hasn't been any detailed modelling.
Yeah.
They're just throwing things out, seeing what
Reactions.
seeing what, okay, we might be able to get away with that. Really, until 7:30 on the 12th of May, which maybe is in the past, we're not going to know.
And so the CGT stuff, so dropping the discount if property held greater than 1 year from 50% down to, let's call it 33%. Talk to me historically about how that differs from when CGT was originally introduced.
Well, there's a lot of people sort of saying, well, we used to have the indexation
Yep.
model, and really for it to reach a degree of parity to a 50% CGT discount, you've got to sort of own the property around about 16 years,
Okay.
right? So if you're selling the property within a 16-year period, you're outperforming the old indexation model in terms of you as the investor, and the government is kind of missing out. And people are sort of saying, oh, well, this is just kind of like an austerity measure to get things back to parity and what was intended with that particular policy. However, it doesn't really matter like what was intended in 1997. We're in 2026. The market, the fundamentals, the dynamics are all completely different. What it basically means is there's going to be less of an incentive for people to invest in property. And we've got to understand that, like, who are property investors? They are aspirational Australians trying to financially change their lives and de-qualify themselves from the age pension.
Exactly, yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that is a huge cost to the federal budget. I mean, pre-NDIS, it was one of the biggest ones, like welfare in general. NDIS is now, that's a whole nother podcast. There's probably going to be budget changes to NDIS because that's just kind of run away.
Yeah,
I think we've got nearly double the intended recipients that are on some sort of scheme at the moment. But yeah, these are people that are just trying to take control of their financial future. We're also, talking about, Chalmers is talking about a sort of a minimum level of tax with family trust. So let's say you and I are married, just to make it awkward.
What a pleasure.
Welcome to West Lake Macquarie. Oh, I've got friends here. That's awkward. And you're a stay-at-home husband.
Yep.
And I'm the breadwinner, and I've got a business, and I take some profits out of the business, and I allocate them to you, and then, up to a certain point, you'll be paying way less tax and hopefully a lot less than 30%. And they're now basically saying, well, you at least have to pay 30%. And it is kind of a little bit bizarre that you can kind of income split in that way.
Yeah.
However, we don't have a flat tax system. The more you earn, the more you pay, not just in terms of percentage, but the percentages increase, right? And that bracket creep has been a problem for forever, right? So we do have to, I think, be very careful about like taxing aspiration, or minimizing the upside to push that little bit further, to go to university, to upskill yourself, to work more, to do a second job, to try harder. I think these are Aussie values that we covet and make us sort of who we are.
And as property investors, right, ultimately your goal is to start paying tax on your property portfolio. You want to be earning passive income or sell down a portfolio to give you X amount of dollars to do other things with. So you want to be paying tax eventually. Like negative gearing is only going to be a moment in time.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, eventually the properties will track to the point that it's positively geared, right?
Correct.
I think like negative gearing isn't really a strategy. It's just an after-tax outcome.
Yeah,
right?
it's a position, right? Yeah.
Most people aren't setting out to lose money in property.
Yeah,
It's funny. Like you do hear people going, oh, I need to buy an investment property. Why? Guys, I'm paying too much tax. Well, do you care if that property goes up in value? Or do you just...
Do you just want to reduce your tax bill?
If it's reducing your taxes because it's costing you more than it's giving you, right?
Yeah.
Of course, the benefit is, you're not crystallising the gain if the asset's growing at
Correct.
7, 10, 15% per year. But yeah, you've got to hold on to the thing if it's negatively geared, right? And yeah, most property investors are hoping that one day that their whole portfolio will be in a positive situation so that, you know, I can quit and we can be married together in Westlake Bay.
Yeah. So let's talk about
feeling comfortable.
Very, very comfortable here. Let's talk about something that you mentioned there, and you hit the nail on the head in terms of what we're seeing at game plans with respect to investor price point, and there's no denying the fact that there's a plethora of buyer in and around that. I'm seeing somewhere between maybe, I don't know, 6 and 750,000. Is that what you guys are seeing? Obviously, having a wealth of data as well. So is that kind of comparable?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, we're looking at the data analysis from last year, there was a number of units that were, you know, over $8 to $10 million purchase price. That
units?
Investors, yeah. So those are unusual outliers. So we sort of tend to look more at the median rather than the average.
Yep.
But yeah, the vast majority of property investors are in and around that sort of, I would probably say in our data, 550 to 600 is probably the biggest chunk there.
Yep.
And you've got to think, well, where is that? Is it Sydney and Melbourne? Well, not really. Like Melbourne's a chance. Because Melbourne's had a shocker
Sydney,
in the last 5
not.
years. No, absolutely not.
So where is it?
Well, I mean, where is it now compared to where it was when people were buying a year
where
ago?
was it and where is it?
Townsville for 2025.
Yeah.
That was the number one location that all of our investors were purchasing in. And that's, you know, did 25% growth in 2025. So well done to all of those people that are playing at home. Before that, we saw WA overtake Queensland, and WA and Queensland really since the pandemic have been sort of neck and neck as getting the lion's share of investors' purchases in our data. Adelaide's obviously been a market that's done really, really well. Our investors just haven't been as active in South Australia as they have been in WA and Queensland. And if you think about Melbourne, it was sort of running long-term average pre-land tax change, about 16%. It dropped to just under 5% immediately after those land tax changes.
Yeah.
Now, as at last count, we're probably sitting on a little bit delayed data at around 27%. So I expect that to be over 30% when we crunch the end of this financial year.
There.
Yeah, because like it's cheap for the first time that I can remember. If you think about, you know, the core logic tables, it's normally, you know, Sydney and then Canberra, which we sort of ignore because it's full of public servants getting paid too much money. But it was Sydney and then Melbourne and then whatever else was going on.
Light years,
Hobart at the bottom, Darwin, Perth.
Somewhere above it.
Perth's now mid to high pack. You know, Melbourne is now a mid packer, right? But there's some tremendous opportunities now because those land tax changes are priced in.
Yeah. People know, they're expecting it now.
People understand it, and the property is a lot cheaper to get involved in. And those regional areas that are a cheaper price point, that have really good population bases, they have a diversification of employers. There's quite a lot going on. They're commutable distance, like Townsville's not a commutable distance to Brisbane.
No.
But Ballarat is to Melbourne. And we've seen Ballarat have runs before on the back of a Melbourne increase, Geelong's places like that.
Gangbusters,
Bendigo's another case study that's going to be entering the chat, I think, pretty heavily next financial year. So, yeah, that's where we're seeing investors transact.
And maybe I should have taken a half step back and allowed you to give us a little bit of insight. We got caught up on budget things, so bear with us. Talk to me, because obviously it's a property strategy podcast, right? Talk to me about why investors are even speaking to you at MCG.
Well,
why is it so important? Because I don't think that a lot of investors don't really understand the importance of it.
I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I would hope they'd pick something up along the way. No, look, I actually think that residential property investors are more educated than commercial investors, technically speaking. We've done so much work for big commercial properties where they've had a CFO that is just throwing 2.5% on the Division 43 or the construction components, and the difference that we can make when we're teasing out all the plant and equipment items, which you can still claim in commercial, but not for secondhand in resi, it's a huge difference. So I actually think that property investors are way more educated today than they were 5 years and certainly 20 years ago. But at the end of the day, I think when we're sort of seeing yields compressing a little bit just because prices have run so well, even though rents are increasing, the yields have been compressing because they haven't kept up with the capital growth. We're seeing increase in interest rates, the war in Iran. In the lead up to this financial year, we've had a really big April. I think people are understanding that depreciation is just a way to maximise your cash flow. Because the worst situation that I think property investors can get into is they have to sell an asset because they didn't understand or forecast the costs. And that's where tools like game plans are so perfect, right? Because it allows you to model it out.
Yeah.
And I've said for years, I sort of equate it to my upbringing. My parents would say, you can have dessert, but you've got to eat your veggies first.
Yeah.
And I talk about the strategy as the veggies. The dessert is the hotspots, right? And if you read any property magazine or you talk to property investors, it's like, where's the next Perth? Where's the next Darwin?
Where are you
am I
buying?
too late on Ballarat? Is Geelong going to be the next one? But I actually think that is far less important than what am I actually trying to do? I want X passive income, or I want to go around the world cruise, or I want to help my children buy a house, or I want to buy a Ferrari.
Yeah.
I'm not here to judge.
Yes, no, absolutely.
That Bentley downstairs
Exactly.
looks
Looked all right, doesn't
I'm
it?
getting older.
Yep,
I could be a distinguished gentleman in a Bentley. But this is the conversation that I think has to come first, because we then have to borrow a Gary Vee term, we have to reverse engineer what do we need to purchase to get there. And when people ask questions like, where's the best place to buy sub, 550 on Facebook? It's like, well, what else do you own? What is your income?
Exactly.
How old
Yeah,
are you?
yeah.
What are you trying to achieve? If you want a passive income of $2 million a year, you need to be talking something a little bit more serious than a $550,000 place in Frankston or something, right?
So is there I just always have this mindset that people go, oh, the property, unless it's brand new, I can't even, there's no point even speaking to you. I always think, whenever I think of depreciation, you think of the shiny house and land package.
Yeah.
Can you firstly just
I
go
hate that about you,
and
Joey.
debunk this myth?
You're better than that. Well, you know what? We can even blame quantity surveyors for this.
So it's your fault.
Not me.
Okay.
A different one.
It's your industry's fault.
It's a different one, a naughty one. No, I actually heard a quantity surveyor, and this is where, I feel like I was a technician for a long time. I did thousands and thousands of depreciation schedules before I started my own business. I heard a quantity surveyor say that new property is always better for depreciation than old. And I think I'm a data person and I say, technically, broadly, macro speaking,
Maybe.
that's a reasonable statement. But let me give you a bit of a case study. If we talk about a brand new project home that costs $400,000 to build, you might get, let's say, $20,000 worth of deductions. Whereas if you buy a property built in the 20s in a blue chip location, let's say
1920s, you say?
Yeah, 1920s.
Okay, yeah.
Brighton or Paddington or Surrey Hills. What if that had been renovated by the previous owner and they spent $2 million on that renovation? 2.5% on $2 million. Those deductions are going to absolutely smash that brand new property. So what people need to consider is that anything that's built prior to 1987, the original building structure won't qualify, but the renovations and improvements will, right?
Okay.
So we need to consider the history of the dwelling. So I've even had accountants say to their clients, oh, it was built, in 1979. Well, there won't be any deductions. But a property built prior to 1987, that cutoff date, is now very, very old. It doesn't make sense to maintain that as unrenovated, because if you're trying to revalue against it to buy another property, you're not going to get the best return. If you're trying to rent that out, you're not going to get premium rent. You want to talk about the quality of tenant. If it's a tired old place, they're not necessarily going to be a premium tenant that's going to look after the place. It just doesn't make sense. So when the budget change happened that limited plant and equipment deductions for brand new property, that was 2017, our data back then was saying that 69% of pre-87 properties had been renovated to an average spend of about $39,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So that would equate to, roughly speaking, $1,000 a year worth of depreciation deductions. Not great, but if you're holding it for a couple of years, the report's easily going to pay for itself.
Yeah.
But that's 2017. Construction costs have gone bananas since then, around about 30% in the 2 years of COVID. We've had a moderated pace of construction growth until the war in Iran, but diesel finds its way into lots of different products. I mean, it's in toothpaste and nappies, right? Sorry, I know you've got a little one. Maybe it's time for cloth. No, I think it's fine to put oil on the bottom of your baby. This isn't medical advice, but oil is just so important.
Yeah.
Like diesel, it equates to around 8% of a total construction cost. It's how we ship materials around the globe with ships and trucks. And it just feeds into so much of what we're doing. And PVC piping is, there's been some plumbing places that have basically said our price has gone up 30%, basically straight away. Yeah.
So what's that? That's 30% since COVID and another 30% hit since.
Well, at least for products like PVC piping, because that comes from the polymers that are all contained with oil. It's magical stuff, right?
Fascinating.
You've got to be
genuinely
careful with it. You can overdo it, and we can all get hot in winter in West Leighton Quarry.
So then, that then feeds through to increased construction costs, which means that there's probably going to be more kind of more reason for you to go out there and get that report done. So it's not. I just wanted firstly that people think that unless the property was recently renovated, or unless I go and renovate a property, there's no reason that I should be doing it. Can someone still go at least make some inquiry? Like, can you reach out and go, "Hey, this is what I've got."
Yeah, we do that. We do that for free. We do that every day.
Someone just on the phone?
Yeah, or email, or
send you a couple of photos,
carry a pigeon, whatever. Well, most of the time there's photos available online. We don't rely on them to do the full schedule. We need to physically inspect the property, but we can sort of see, okay, well, you bought this particular property and it was originally constructed in, let's say it was 1982, but we can see that it's got stainless steel appliances. Well, they didn't really exist pre-2000, right? So are you going to put brand new stainless steel appliances in an old kitchen? Probably not.
Yeah.
And property has fashion, like clothing.
Of course.
I know I'm probably the wrong person to speak about. I basically wear the same thing every day. But like this particular place that we're in at the moment.
Look it up here.
Yeah, so like we've got, these are aluminium windows. They're probably not necessarily original, but this place has a real 90s aesthetic to it. And so after doing tens of thousands of depreciation schedules, you get an idea about the colours and the types of appliances, and you can pin those down. Sometimes the council will actually have a development application for improvements. That makes it very easy to pin us down. Sometimes hot water systems will have a manufactured date. That sticker can be an indication, because often those things are done during the major renovations. So all of those things qualify. And my point was that $39,000 in 2017 is probably closer to $60,000 in 2026.
What does that mean your depreciation would be?
Well, for every $100,000, the worst you can do is 2,500.
Wow, okay.
Okay, so that's assuming that everything is structural.
Yep.
But with plant and equipment, if you're doing that yourself, the depreciation rates are a lot higher. So 2.5% for the construction, but say for carpet, it's 25% if you put in new carpet, right? So it's 10 times better. But yeah, look, most old properties are going to be renovated, and our job is to basically say, it's either worthwhile paying for the report in year one, or we'll recommend that they either don't do it or chat to their accountant about the sort of rough numbers that we've got and get them to say, yes, like you've owned it for a year, we've got a back claim, or I know that you're going to own it for 5 years, so it absolutely makes sense.
And I think it makes so much sense, especially when, like you said there, that the rental yields are really, really tight, and cash flow is becoming a great concern for a lot of investors, which is a nice segue into another conversation that I want to have. Are you seeing investors, I mean, not historically, but kind of post-COVID, we've seen this flight towards big freestanding houses on the biggest blocks as possible. What are you seeing, that there is a kind of maybe some green shoots in terms of people looking at strata as a yield option? Are you seeing that in your business at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing it more than I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
Houses are still absolutely the dominant dwelling type with our residential property investors. The land sizes have probably been shrinking. People will compromise on land size to try and get a house rather than a townhouse or a villa unit. But those types of dwellings are a beautiful middle ground. So say, for example, an apartment in a relatively, let's say, a medium-sized complex, a townhouse or a villa is kind of in the middle. Like we see that in floor area. So that sort of goes house, townhouse, unit, and townhouse is fairly closely in the middle. We know that land is the thing that appreciates, and people understand that they want to try and get as much as they can. There's people looking at development sort of potential down the track, or maybe splitting and forcing value. We're seeing a lot more interest now in things like granny flats, just to try and get those yields on the back end. So it's a cash flow play. I would say 23, 24 and 25 were probably the year of people chasing affordable locations. And I can't really see that particularly changing as we're potentially getting rate rise.
But if locations become harder and harder to find?
Yeah, I think
like if my budget is 500, where am I going to find that next?
Well, people are compromising. So I would expect to see a high proportion of units in the next year or two, especially if we're getting some interest rate rises. I mean, the war in Iran is almost 25 basis points in terms of the cost to our households as it is. We're probably going to have another couple. The banks are pricing in, another 2 or 3 as at the time of recording. So if people are looking for a particular location, they're probably going to find themselves maybe priced out at that 550, 650 budget for a house. So they're looking at units, but we're not looking at high-rise units like we did see a lot, say pre-2019. Average number of units in a complex, we sort of saw peak at around about 90.
90,
90, yeah. These days it's probably closer. I haven't seen the latest data, but I remember seeing it at 60, and it's probably a little bit smaller than that now. So people are understanding that there's some real bomb-proof, like 60s and 70s type, like they don't make them like they used to, dwellings, where, there's a very limited amount of common areas, so the strata fees are manageable. Many of them have fairly good capital works funds or sinking funds, and people are doing well. And there's often places like in Sydney and Brisbane where the differential between a house and a unit in the same suburb, which has the same school catchments, the same commutable distance to where people want to be, it's like $1 million differential.
I think about Coogee, for example, where a house could cost you easily 5 or 6 million. And you could buy an apartment for under 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think investors are cottoning on to that. Most investors aren't buying, sub $2 million units in Coogee. It still happens. I remember when they were buying them for $750, and I wish I'd bought 100 of them. But I mean,
this goes to show, right? It still can appreciate in value. It doesn't. There isn't no capital growth because it's a strata property.
No, absolutely not.
I think it's still worthwhile to get the depreciation report as well?
Yeah, well, it depends what's been done. So if it's built prior to 1987, we need to look at improvements and renovations.
But again, most of these, more than likely,
they've all had something.
Something done.
And
probably a kitchen, flooring, lighting, maybe a bathroom if they've...
Yeah, well, kitchen and bathroom reno, like back when I was talking 2017, you could do that for $39,000. Now it's like a call-out fee to get a quote, right? Because tradies remember my father sort of saying, get a trade, son, you'll always be all right. And I said, I'll get lost, Dad. I'm going to uni. I don't need a trade. And now I'm thinking, geez, I should have got a trade. He was right, wasn't he? That's where the money is,
literally.
But we have a huge trades shortage at the moment. That's actually a bigger problem than construction costs at the moment. And that's one of the big reasons why we haven't been able to build our 1.2 million homes in 5 years, or we're not on track for that run rate. And I just see it further slipping away, right? So instead of going, oh yeah, we failed on that big press release from nearly 3 years ago, but that's not the reason why house prices are unaffordable. It's certainly not the first homeowner grants that have helped to stimulate the market. It's property investors. They're the bad guys, so we need to tax them.
So what is the solution? What is the solution for, apart from just build more dwellings, what is the solution to this housing crisis problem? Do you think that price growth can continue at the rate of which it has had historically?
Well, I mean, think about Sydney maybe 20 years ago. I remember people saying like the median house price will never go above $1 million because people will just like fundamentally go, no way. Like I'm not letting that
Yeah,
happen.
I just
Like
can't
there's
pay
one
that.
person
Yeah,
that
yeah,
decides.
yeah.
Income to asset price, won't get over 10x or 20x. I mean, all of those things happen. Sydney is an unusual place though. It's an international city and there's quite a big transfer of intergenerational wealth. So you could be on, $200,000 a year and get a $1.8 million home because the bank of mum and dad,
step
who
in to
maybe
help.
have worked in finance for their whole life, you're off to the races. I do think a little bit like this year rents haven't grown as much as they did last year because like a 3-bedroom crappy house just can't be $2,000 a week. People will change their behaviour.
Yeah, yeah.
We've seen household formation rates anecdotally increasing, so there's more people per dwelling. We're seeing people stay at home with mum and dad a little bit more than they were. So there is a ceiling for how far that it can go, but I just can't see anything changing fast because the government is propping up the first home buyers and making it easier and easier to buy a property because they sort of have to. But supply is the big one. Taxation is a big one. Like the cost of bringing on new dwellings, like around about 40% of it, depending on who you speak to, is made up in taxes, right? The HIA have basically said that the majority of their small home builders are saying approval times are 8 weeks and over. We've just got the zoning wrong. It's just, there's a lot of fundamental changes that need to happen. And just trying to tax investors a little bit more is a short-term solution to it.
And so obviously with all that in mind, you can't see a capital appreciation slow down. You can't see price growth go backwards.
No, well, I mean, like it will, and historically it does. Like we've never really seen it go back more than 9% ever in a downturn, right? Certainly in a 12-month period, and we're now at like 9% growth right now. Like it's normal actually. So it depends on the location, but for areas that have constrained supply, that have job growth and employment opportunities, there's still a huge amount of opportunities around the country. And we've sort of been looking at the distance that investors buy from where they live. First time we crunched that number, which is about 2018, it was 293 kilometres was the average distance people bought from where they lived. That peaked at almost 2,000 kilometres during the rise of Perth.
I was going to say, you're obviously buying the other side of Australia.
It's a Perth thing. The data is now saying 890 is the average distance that people buy from where they live, and the median is around about 295.
Yeah, okay.
So still we're getting about 22% of investors that buy within 20 k's of where they live because people do they love the familiarity of the location. But more than that are buying
elsewhere.
More than 200 k's from where they live. So there's an argument to say that they're not physically inspecting that. They're using data. They're using increasingly buyers agents to look at the nation as like, where is the best investment? And I've always sort of said that to people like, oh, where are you looking for your investment property? Oh, we're looking in the suburb where we live. I'm like, what are the chances that the best location for capital growth just happens to be
around the corner from your
where
house?
you live? Yeah. And then there's also an eggs in a basket sort of analogy. But I think when we first crunched that, I expected the average distance to be a lot closer. Because the narrative is that investors aren't terribly sophisticated. They just buy familiar. They're not very clever. 290 said that wasn't true. And right now at like 890, we are increasingly looking around the country, and budget finds its way into that as well because regional markets are just more affordable.
So I thought there would have been like lots of accidental investors. Like I had this property and now I rented it out and I bought a new one. So naturally it's going to be in a similar geographical location to the next.
Yeah, well, we had a story in the Courier Mail, I think it was like 2019, where we were the first people that, I've never seen the data before. We looked at the percentage of property investors who lived in their property prior to renting it out. We asked that question because if you buy a property and you live in it, you can't claim the depreciation deductions while it's your principal place of residence. So we need to know, when did you move out? When can we start maximising the deductions? And we found that at 22% of investors lived in the property before renting it out. So the story was actually the rise of accidental property investors. Now, there's reasons why people might technically do that. Some people were saying, oh, no, that's just a first homeowner grant hack, right? They're going in there, they're living in it for 12 months, and then they're renting it out. But we actually found that the average amount of time that they lived in it was closer to 4 years than 12 months, right? So what I sort of posited was the idea was that people were living in a property, they were wanting to upgrade, chatting to their broker and saying, you know, you don't actually have to sell this. Like we could still get it done, especially when interest rates were a little bit more reasonable back then. So yeah, people were becoming accidental investors. And that begs the question, well, how much of it is strategy? Do they know about things like tax depreciation? Do they have a plan, or are they just going like, "Oh shit, I'm a property investor now. So like, now what do I do?" You know?
Do you have insights in terms of? And I say this because everyone quotes the ABS data from 400 years ago. Yeah. In terms of how many assets your clients hold.
Oh, look, that is not something that we've ever published before. It's not, last time we looked at it, it's not too dissimilar to the ABS data, where the vast majority are 2 or less. Yeah. So, you know, the ATO tax stats is basically saying that only 10% of investors own 3 or more. Depending on the year, it's about 0.8 of 1% own 6 or more. Of course, it depends. Like with the rise of buyer's agents, I've seen that number anecdotally increase quite a bit. And there are certain buyer's agent businesses that we work with where I would say the average is probably 5 to 10. But no, it's not something that we've actually crunched in its entirety before. And I suppose it would be interesting. Yeah, because I know you guys have got that data.
It would be, yeah. And that's like, but even me, right? Because I see portfolios all the time. But again, if you're a game plans user, you're working with a BA or another partner, you're probably the kind of upper end of investor. So again, I'm flooded with multi-property portfolios that I'm seeing all the time. So I don't really see the everyday investor who may only have the one property. So my kind of threshold is what you're probably seeing, in that there is an overwhelming number of clients who have multiple properties in their portfolio. Lots of them have more than 2.
It would make sense that you'd be overrepresented with sophisticated investors who see the value in a platform, whereas many of our investors would be going to their accountant and they're saying, have you had a depreciation schedule? And they say, what's that? You know, so there's not a huge amount of sophistication for some of them, which is why we're probably sitting closer to those ATO tax stat figures. In terms of yourself, I usually ask the guest this question up front, but let's flip the script on this. We have done so with a lot else in this conversation. Talk to me about that very first property purchase that Mike Mortlock ever bought. What was it? When was it? What is it? Do you still own it? What's it worth today? Sad story. I'm trying to remember. It was around about 2007, 2008. I bought a house.
I'm feeling a bit GFC.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I either got 100% or 105% loan from Rams back in the good old days, the Wild West. We didn't actually have to have money. You know, you could still buy something.
But how did you go in with like 105? Like a guarantee or something?
No. Obviously, I had the salary to support it, and it was just one of those. So
they let you the deposit, stamp duty, and everything. You didn't have any additional security.
No. I had the first homeowner grant, I believe. So that was my principal place of residence, but I rented out a front room so I could do depreciation on that. Obviously,
legally,
got a CGT bill. Yeah, legally. Only a portion of it. But that, I think, it was a pretty awful place, but very well located in Newcastle near the university and close into town. I think I paid $230 from memory. It was a 2-bedder with 2 living areas, and I'd studied a bit of valuation, and I'm like, you know what I need to do? I need to cheaply turn this into 3 and force valuers to look at the 3-bedroom comparables. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it did. So I got that to $300K, I think probably within 24 months, and around about 10 or 15K of expenditure in terms of moving some walls and that sort of stuff. And I'm trying to remember now, I sold it many years ago for around about 350, 360. So I did all right.
Yeah, you got a pretty good uplift.
What's it worth now? Price. 800 or 900 maybe.
Could you have kept it if looking back?
I should have moved heaven and earth. I should have sold my soul to the devil.
Some people are like, oh no, I had to because it was funding X, Y, and Z project. But like,
Yeah.
could you have?
At the time, I did sort of need to, but I think back and I pause and reflect and think there had to be a way.
Could have.
There had to be a way.
Probably could
Yeah. But, like these pain lectures are important. There's actual studies on knowledge retention and learning things. And if somebody hurts you while they teach you something, you're more likely to remember it, right? Now, that's not obviously something the Department of Education have invested in.
They used to.
Yeah, they did. Yes, yeah. So if you whack someone with a stick and you tell them something, they're more likely
They'll
to
learn
retain
that,
it.
yeah.
So I learned a very good lesson is that it's rarely a good time to sell a property. And, it makes me think about the parallels between that and the situation that we're in now. So you and I were at the Buyer's Agent Awards a couple of weeks ago, as at the time of recording. And I was hearing from BAs saying, like the ones that were honest, were saying, like inquiries slowed up a little bit. People are worried. They're worried about the war. They're worried about interest rates. They're worried about the budget. And, so many people say like, I just want to see what happens or I'll wait till this particular thing happens. And I've spoken to buyers agents that have had, a sea of those people on the sidelines and they're like, the budget happened and it was fine, or the election happened and the people that we sort of were worried that were going to get in didn't get in.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to go now. And these buyers agents are saying, well, you and everybody else, like I actually am now at capacity.
Yeah, join the queue.
People think that's a marketing pitch, but for some, buyers agents, like we're only taking on a certain amount of people. I can't help but feel that there are parallels to now. Like if you look at property over a 20, 30, 50-year time frame, GFCs and COVID pandemics are these little blips in time. And, the people that can look themselves or they consider their heart of hearts, like were there times in the past where they were sitting on the sidelines and thinking, gosh, I wish I'd bought then. Like, don't be doing that now. I feel like this is a huge opportunity amidst this uncertainty.
Definitely.
Personally, myself, I was trying to exchange something pre-budget because I thought that's peak time. It's going to probably push me. I haven't actually got there. I've got a few things that need to line up before I get to. I'll have to wait till the end of the financial year. But I still think there's going to be a lot of uncertainty around this 4-week war that is now. I don't know how many weeks we're into now.
A couple of months, aren't we?
Yeah, and we don't know what's going to happen with the budget. Variably, it's going to frighten people that don't have a long-term mindset. And when we get back to strategy and game plans, I really think you need to have a long-term mindset. There are certainly way more people these days that are buying in boom markets like places like Perth or like Darwin that have got a short-term view and they've basically, set their stop losses or they're like, this is where we're taking our profits. Some people have done really well in that. That's a fairly technical thing to do. The best people to do that are probably people that own high volume buyers agency businesses because they know when the taps are going on and off. But for us mere mortals, it's a tricky game to get right. I really feel like the shortcuts are at the butcher's shop and you really need to think about the long term.
Well, what's your long-term strategy then? Like, what's your Mike Mortlock's personal philosophy?
Well,
just buy and hold good quality property.
Yeah, I mean, here and there are opportunities where you can add some value because properties sort of deteriorate over time. If you're making improvements, repairs and maintenance are immediately deductible. Renovations you can depreciate as well. So there's times where that's appropriate. There's times where you've got something that's got a little bit of land which you could split, you can add value, you can increase the yield with granny flats. So I'm not against any of that sort of stuff, but I prefer the really kind of boring, get rich slow sort of stuff. I love the land component, I love established houses, and I like locations that aren't flash in the pan, boom, bust cycles, that have diversified employers and jobs growth. I think if you rate what is likely to push an increase in house prices, well, first, from a macro point of view, it's availability of credit. People have got to borrow, right? But very near second is jobs. You need incomes, and you need incomes to be rising in that particular location. And if you think about Townsville, the amount of investment that's gone in there, lots of military, there's been quite a lot going on there in terms of the health sector. We're seeing similar sort of things with Ballarat. That's a diversified employer. It's close to a capital city. The work from home stuff goes into that. It's got a big health precinct as well. Places like Bendigo actually got big financial sectors and diversification. These places have got those fundamentals that I think people can just get into, buy a quality asset, and be patient. with
Yeah,
it.
and wait, and then
Yeah.
wait. So it's really interesting your philosophy there. And is there like, do you have for yourself personally like a mindset of like, okay, then this is enough. Once I get to this, that will be enough from like a goals point of view?
Yes, and one thing that I suppose has come with some of these grey hairs that I'm sure are popping on camera right now is that like there's two ways to be wealthy, right? One is to have more money and generate more income. The other one is to have a greater degree of satisfaction with what you have now or less. And I remember, and I sort of equate it to when I was in my 20s, I'd be, earning a certain salary, and I love a Shiraz, so I'd be buying like a $16 bottle. And then I get a pay rise, and I'm like, ooh, I'm up to like 19 a bottle now. And then I got to sort of like 25, and then I was like, I can see what's happening here. Like every time I get a pay rise, I just find new and innovative ways to spend it.
Yeah.
So these days, I actually have kind of spent a little bit of time just saying like, what do I actually really need? And it's weird when you think about like recreationally, what do Australians like to do? Well, lots of us like to go into the country and camp. It's actually sort of getting back to more of our sort of
Primal.
aged ancestors.
Yeah.
Because that's something to understand as well. Like the world has changed so rapidly, but our brains really haven't changed that much in 200,000 years. I've met some people that you could argue they haven't changed at all. So so how much is enough? I think like
Do you know, have you done that math for you after you said that little exercise there? Like when you go, how much do you actually need recreationally?
No, like, I mean, I've got sort of a number as a bit of a passive income goal for myself, but for most people, it's not $200,000-$300,000 a year.
It's really not, right?
It just depends what you're wanting to do. Like if you're looking at Instagram, you'll just always feel like you're a shit kicker and you've got nothing, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone puts their best. I mean, it's not even real.
No.
Right? I tried to act against that because I had a really nice pair of Tommy Hilfiger shoes that I bought at a factory outlet in the States for like $40 US, and I had some duct tape on them, and I put that on Instagram. I'm like, take that, algorithm. Like I love these shoes, and I'm sad that I'm maybe going to have to say goodbye, but right now the duct tape's doing a good job. So like I would just encourage people to understand that like nobody gets out alive. We're all going to die, and I used to live for the future. I'm going to work hard now because later on I'll have some money and I'll do this or I'll do that. Or no, I'm not going to go on a holiday, or I'm not going to do, some renovations around the house to make it a nice place to live because I've got to shove it all into investments, and later on that's when I'll do the living. But believe it or not, you and I are actually living right now. Every choice that we make, the choice to be here in West Lake Macquarie together, is how we've decided that we want to spend our lives. Now, of course, you're sort of doing a job for Gave Plans, and I'm doing that as well. If we turn the cameras off, it's probably a bit early for a drink, but I'd quite happily sit here and have one with you. But like, I mean, I know I'm being a bit sort of odd and esoteric. You could say I'm being on brand maybe. But yeah, I really just think that people need to analyse, well, what is life about to them? What's most important? And when you remove all of the noise and the Instagram and these instant gratification dopamine things, like these reels and that, that's terrible for your brain, right? And there's Harvard studies about the value of boredom. Like people aren't bored anymore, but it turns on a creative center in your brain that if you don't do that, you won't have ideas. Like I worry about what's happening in the future. So I would encourage people to do the work and think about, well, what do I actually really need? And it's probably going to be way less than what you think.
I'm seeing that 1,000%. Mate, the last question I have, you said you went from $15 bottle to $18 bottle to $25 bottle. What are you drinking at the moment?
Well, honestly, I get nervous opening anything over $100. Okay. And these are normally gifts. Like I don't buy $100 wine myself. Yeah. I would say my palate probably taps out at like $50. Okay. I don't have the palate to go like, oh, that's the western side of the river. It's a bit silly. Yeah. The differential between a $16 bottle and a $25 bottle is actually very big. Yeah. The differential between a 30 and a 50 is not much. The differential between a 50 and a 100 is like, you could put two side by side and I won't always get it right.
So the $30 bottle's about the sweet spot.
30's fine. You can have a great time with a $30 bottle, especially if you're buying smartly.
You know what? I think that's a beautiful place to finish the podcast. Mike Mortlock, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the next one.